This week on Houston Newsmakers, the immigration story just will not go away. The Trump administration announcing stepped-up plans for border security, including an expedited effort to deport illegal immigrants. Sociologist Dr. Steve Kleinberg has studied Houston for more than 3 decades. Is here to talk about the ways our region may be impacted. Harris County Clerk Chris Daniel is here. We'll ask about the bizarre incident in his offices recently and about a very interesting Black history story involving Harris County. Gary Pollan of the Texas Conservative Review is here to talk about what's going right and wrong in the Trump administration's first month. Houston Newsmakers starts right now.
From KPRC Channel 2, this is Houston Newsmakers with Cambrell Marshall.
And welcome to Houston Newsmakers and to Dr. Steve Kleinberg, who for more than 35 years has been taking deep dives into the demographic and the sociology of Houston with the Houston Area Survey, which is now a part of the Kinder Institute for Urban Research. Good to see you again.
Thank you, Cambrell. Always great to be here.
We often hear about how Houston is the most demographically diverse city in the United States. How do we get to that point, and now how is it impacted in terms of the latest things that are being done by the Trump administration regarding immigration?
So the basic story is that we were riding the oil boom when 82% of the jobs in Houston were tied into the price of oil. Houston was booming during the 1970s and 80s until 1982. And during the oil boom, it was Anglos pouring into Houston. This is where the jobs were. After 1982, the Anglo population of Harris County stopped growing. And all the growth of this, the most rapidly growing city in America, has been the influx of African Americans, Latinos, and Asians. And this biracial southern city has become the most ethnically diverse city in the country.
And Hispanic population has really overtaken everybody else.
41% of everybody is Hispanic now, 33% are Anglo. And no city has benefited more from that immigration. Had Houston not become one of the magnets for the new immigration in the last 30 years, we would have lost population.
And that is what kind of makes Houston almost ground zero in terms of an opportunity to analyze what's going on with the immigration crisis process.
Yes,
that's going on.
Yeah, we always tell people this is where the American future is being worked out.
You've seen the pictures from various parts of the country, including here in Houston, about some of the protests about the new rules of immigration, the agents that have been coming in and doing, quite frankly, what many people think they should be doing, and that's removing people from the United States who are here illegally. Now, they can clearly cause problems with families being split up and that sort of thing. So what's the ultimate trade-off? Is it the sense of us being safer? Is it campaign promise being fulfilled, or is it a combination of both?
Well, and it's a good question. I mean, the essence is that we've always been ambivalent about immigration. We've always thought that, this is the 4th great wave of immigration in American history. We had the Germans and the Irish coming in the 1800s, and then, of course, the Greeks, Poles, and Italians at the turn of the century, and now Latinos and Asians. And every time we've always felt, well, the last immigration was good for America. This new immigration stream is destroying the country. And so there's always been that ambivalence about right now. But we've had now 30 years in Houston of being a city of immigrants. And the experience of that immigration, the richness of the city, and the fact that what we're now watching is in the growth of the Latino and Asian populations are not new immigrants anymore. This is 100% American kids who are the children of the immigrants of 25 and 30 years ago.
I know you're in the process of collecting the 36th year worth of information, but let's talk about one of the survey results. 2016, it found interesting. The immigrant population, as it's increased in the region, attitudes seem to be better. 79% indicate the numbers of undocumented immigrants living in the Houston area are not a very serious problem. What are some of the reasons behind that?
Yeah, I think two things. One is we've had 30 years of being a city of immigrants, and so at the beginning, we track identical questions over time, increasing acceptance, increasing sense, decreasing antagonism toward the new immigration as we begin to realize how much we are benefiting from this immigration, how much we are falling in love with each other, marrying and making multiracial babies, right? 28% of all U.S.-born Latinos are married to non-Latinos. 1/3 of all the marriages involving an Asian in the last 3 years has involved a non-Asian. We're moving into this transracial world, and families all have immigrants and connections to immigrants. And so it's, we have come to recognize and to accept and indeed to some degree embrace what is the new reality of Houston and America in the 21st century.
I noticed another part of that survey, though, that says while that seems to be a positive outcome, at least so far, still slightly more than half of the community still is kind of leery about some aspects of the issue. One of those survey questions was those saying that they have positive feelings about undocumented immigrants are at 49%. Compared to 31% in 2010. It's increasing, but it's still not the majority.
Still not the majority. Oh, yeah. No, well, that's the ambivalence. And you know, the sense that all these immigrants have come here and they came here illegally. Well, the reason why there are 500,000 illegal immigrants in Harris County, Texas, because for 30 years, we have not allowed enough immigrants to come here legally to do the jobs that this economy desperately needed to have done by people who desperately needed to do them. And the only way you could get here as someone with a strong right arm wanting to work hard and to support a family, without family connections in America and without high levels of technical skills, the only way you could get here was to come illegally. And people have been here for 20, 30 years, contributing tremendously to the Houston economy. As I say, no city has benefited more from this immigration. So it's the ambivalence is there, the lack of clarity, the enormous importance of leadership. How do people frame this? Is this the American story, or is this illegal bad people who are coming in here and taking our jobs? And
well, did the president's new rules in terms of the deportation part really would, no matter how long somebody has been here, if they're illegal, they're likely to be taken and going back? I mean, that's
who have committed no serious crime, right? Exactly. And scaring 500,000 people in this city who have been contributing and been part of our fabric for 25, 30 years.
As you're a sociologist, so you know that elections have consequences, and a lot of people voted for this president based upon some of those things he said he was going to do. So it shouldn't be that big of a surprise, except that he's actually doing what he said he was going to do. Well,
and we'll see how far you can get with that. I mean, and we'll see how far the broader population of Houstonians are going to allow this to happen and not say, wait a minute, this is not who we are. This is not what America is.
Okay, this is just one area. The rest of the country may feel a little bit differently. Let's talk about how long it takes for the process, so the people's feelings, how long it takes for that to be translated into actually policy. Because there's a difference between how people may feel and how the lawmakers who are making the laws actually operate.
Yeah, tremendous disjunction between public opinion, which is when you ask people the privacy of their homes, how do you see the world, you get a very different picture than public opinion, politically effective opinion that is translated into action. A lot depends on who votes, on who gets elected, on how the process unfolds. And what you're seeing today, which is so interesting, I think, is the mobilization of the vast majority of Americans who were confident that the country was moving in the right direction and are now increasingly skeptical. So it's going to be interesting to see how all this plays out, because the Trump administration is speaking to one part of the American psyche, which is nervousness and concern about the changes. I want my country back.
I remember Donald talked to our next guest about some of this too. Back in 2008, 2009, a lot of people started to rise up when President Obama came in. They were upset about health care and that sort of thing. So this trend is continuing. The question is, what kind of impact will it have on this president?
How sustainable is it, and how does it get translated into policy?
Dr. Kleinberg, it's always great to have you. I'm looking forward to how soon before the next survey is coming out.
Well, we get the data at about the middle of March, and then there's the big release of the findings at the Kinder Luncheon on the 1st of May.
Okay, so you're coming in right after that, right here?
It'll be very interesting to see what changes have occurred. Of course,
looking forward to it, because we had to talk about the transgender thing too, because that's big.
You bet.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Okay, appreciate it. Hey, so when we talk about what's been happening here, should we really be surprised about what's happening based upon what President Trump said while on the campaign?
I am going to create a new special deportation task force focused on identifying and quickly removing the most dangerous criminal illegal immigrants in America who have evaded justice.
A conservative view about what's going right and wrong so far in the Trump administration. The Houston Newsmakers continues.